in light of their faith. So of course, reminder that your job, our job as Laudato Si animators is to live Laudato Si, to bring Laudato Si to life in our communities, our parishes, wherever we are engaging other people, and of course also ourselves in this journey of living Laudato Si. And of course, we do this at two levels. We live this in our personal lives, our own choices, and our own ways of being in the world, how we personally hear the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor, as Pope Francis called us to in Laudato Si. We also are called to do that in our communities. And as animators, the very title tells us that we're going to be animating others to live Laudato Si as well. At GCCM, we talk a lot about being both the turtle and a hare or the rabbit, that we have to go both slow and fast. And that's a paradox, but it's what we're called to do. That we're called to go slow, which is our ecological conversion, which we know takes a lifetime. And we need to quiet ourselves and take time for contemplation and meditation. But we also know that the urgency of our environmental crisis, our climate crisis, also requires us to go fast. So while we go slow in our spiritual lives, in our ecological conversion, we often are called to move very fast in our actions so that we are addressing the urgency of the crises that we're in. And this kind of two states of pace, of both going slow and going fast, goes throughout this continuum of working in our spiritual dimension, the lifestyle changes of the different ways that we live Laudato Si in our lifestyles and the lives of our communities, and then how we raise our voices for bold public policies, that they're all undergirded by the slow ecological conversion. And then we move into responding quickly as needed out of that contemplation and meditation. So just a review, I know you've gone over some of these before, but just to remember these three stages that we're working through both personally and as animators is one is the ecological conversion. And that's something that underlies all of our work, and through prayer, through reflection on Laudato Si, and through just deepening understanding of what we're called to. And these quotes from Laudato Si hopefully are helpful in helping us understand this ecological conversion. The ecological crisis is also a summons to profound interior conversion and ecological conversion, which is found in Laudato Si number 217. And then the Pope also writes, I would like to offer Christians a few suggestions for an ecological spirituality, which can motivate us to a more passionate concern for the protection of our world. And then the second kind of bucket of work that we're meant to do, both personally and with our communities, is living more simply. And then Laudato Si, there's lots of calls from the Pope for this and what that means for us. And he writes, humanity is called to recognize the need for changes of lifestyle, production, and consumption in order to combat this warming. Of course, he's referring in this instance to climate change and global warming. And so out of our ecological conversion, we're called to live more simply. And out of that ecological conversion, we're doing these acts of changes in lifestyles to witness this call to live Laudato Si. And out of that, we're called to be a prophetic voice. How do we challenge others in our communities, in our governments, to also live Laudato Si fully? And Pope Francis has said about this, our common home is being pillaged, laid waste and harmed with impunity. Cowardice in defending it is a grave sin. People and their movements are called to cry out, to mobilize and to demand, peacefully but firmly, that appropriate and urgently needed measures be taken. I ask you in the name of God to defend Mother Earth. That's a pretty strong call by the Pope, that he's asking us in the name of God to defend Mother Earth. And so what does that mean for us? How do we respond to that call? And one thing is to take the Laudato Si pledge, which is on the GCCM website. And this is calling you simply to pledge to live out all these different dimensions of praying for and with creation, to live more simply, and to advocate to protect our common home. And it looks like you'll have the opportunity to fill out this pledge. And that's a pledge that you're doing for yourself to live this out, and then as an animator to help others live this out as well. So again, as we're animators, we're called to live by example. So we do these 3 dimensions of prayer, living simply, and action for ourselves, to be living witnesses, and then we call others to do this as well. And we heard this quote before: everyone's talents and involvement are needed to redress the damage caused by human abuse of God's creation. So we know it's only in community that we can fully take the actions and make the changes that we need, both to hear the cry of the poor and the cry of the earth. So when you're thinking of your final project and thinking about these 3 areas, that your project could be in any of these. You could do a project that's related to ecological conversion. You could do a project that's related to simple lifestyle or reducing our footprint on the earth. And then you could also look at raising a prophetic voice. And you'll see a whole listing here. I know that we have some French speakers, but hopefully maybe this gets translated for them later, so I don't have to read this whole list. But this is just for you to reflect on and think of some examples. And then I'll go into some examples in the following slides. But there's all different ways of inviting people into prayer, into inviting people into a simpler lifestyle as a community, and also to raise your prophetic voices. So I just want to share some examples of what some other groups have done as part of their projects, the animators before you. And in the first arena of ecological conversion, we've had some parishes that have taken walks in nature. They've taken a group out into nature. We know it's often said that we only protect what we love. So the first step for really getting people to protect our common home is for them to develop a love of that environment. And the closer to our home that we do that, the better. So people really have a personal relationship with other creatures and with the rest of the beauty of nature around us. Another way that some folks have animated groups is through outdoor prayer services or liturgies. I know my own parish in Silver Spring, Maryland, last summer and through early fall, we actually had outdoor masses because of the pandemic. That was a safer way to gather together, and it was absolutely beautiful. We gathered underneath some trees on the property, and someone had fashioned an altar out of a tree trunk, and so we celebrated the Eucharist in this just beautiful setting. And I'm certainly hoping that those kind of practices continue, not just because of necessity in a pandemic, but because it's just another way to glorify God and to be together as community. And then we can also have programming. We can call it, when it's safe to do so, we can call people together in our churches, in our schools, for prayer services, for educational opportunities, to really engage people in depth in this journey of ecological conversion. And then we have lifestyle changes. How do we invite our communities to together make a public witness for simple lifestyle? You can see here that we had a group that was cleaning up a beach. Lots of plastic, lots of trash. They're cleaning up the beach. We have a plant swap in a parish where people brought plants to share with one another to grow. We have school gardens where school children are learning about agriculture and about tending to God's creation through growing produce, vegetables, and fruits. And then I just love the eco bricks. You'll see in the top right that people have made bricks to build structures out of plastic bottles of soda or what other plastic bottles. You fill the plastic bottles with like newspapers to make them heavier, and then you can build structures. I know our school run by the Sisters of Mercy in the Philippines has had the children do a lot of eco bricks, and they created a shelter for the students to wait in for the parents to pick them up after school, all made out of these eco bricks. And it's taking plastic bottles out of the waste stream, and so you finding another use for them so they don't end up in our landfills. You can find a lot of examples of what groups are doing in GCCM's Eco Parish Guide. It's Eco Parish Guide, Bringing Laudato Si to Life, and you can find that on the website, and you'll find some other ideas for these lifestyle changes that you can consider for your parish, for your school, the other groups that you're working with. And finally, we have Raising a Prophetic Voice. And this is where a good part of my work with the Sisters of Mercy comes in. We do a lot of advocacy, a lot of calling our elected officials to take action for the planet and for groups that are most impacted by ecological devastation. So here you can see a group that did a witness about during the season of creation that they're calling for climate justice. And the other pictures is a rally that I participated in just a few weeks ago here in Washington, DC, that was led by Indigenous young people who are calling for President Biden to put an end to a pipeline that would travel through Indigenous lands in Minnesota. And there's some very precious wild rice that they grow there, and they're very concerned that this pipeline would threaten that. So oftentimes as Catholics, as Laudato Si animators, we can, as in the one picture, have our own call, our own witness. In other cases, we're called to participate with others, to join other people's call for action, call for solidarity, as we recognize peoples who are most harmed by climate change and by ecological devastation. We want to lift their voices up and be in solidarity with them and join their rallies, their marches, their call for justice. Also want to share with you a couple of opportunities throughout this year to pay attention to as animators. As you may know, later this year is COP26, which is the International Climate Talks. We're all familiar with the climate agreement reached in 2015 in Paris, and this is the big follow-up where all the countries are meant to increase their ambition to commit to greater climate action. And so there'll be opportunities for all of us to lift up the messaging that we want to see out of those international talks to protect the lives of our sisters and brothers around the world who are most at risk from climate change. And then there also will be this international talks on biological diversity in the fall as well. And that'll be another opportunity to lift up the great need for biological diversity and the concern that we are losing so much of that by deforestation and other ecological devastation. So just be on the alert for more information from GCCM and other networks around how you can make your voice heard on these very important moments for action for us as Catholics and for us as animators. And another thing that is really an important step that you might consider as part of your project and just your ongoing work as animators and as Catholics committed to Laudato Si is the whole idea of divestment from fossil fuels. We know that every few months, GCCM has had a big announcement of Catholic institutions that have committed to divesting. And we know that Pope Francis has echoed this call as well. So you might want to consider how you might talk to your diocese, your school, your religious order, any institution you're involved with about how they could think about starting to divest from fossil fuels and make a very bold statement about the need to transition to a clean energy future. So we'd love to hear from you about when you think about your final project, what category do you think you'll be looking at? Are you looking at doing something in the realm of spirituality, ecological conversion? If so, put in the chat the number 1. If you're thinking you're going to do something more in the sustainability or living simply category, please put number 2 in the chat. Or if you think you're going to do something around advocacy or raising your voice in a public witness, please put number 3 and 4 if you're not sure. That's okay if you're not sure. But we just want to get a sense in the chat box now. If you could just put in the chat where you think you will land in this, where you think you might, what kind of project you might like to do. Oops, sorry about that. So hopefully you're all, I can't see the chat for some reason, but hopefully you all can. I think it's because I'm sharing my screen. So I just wanted to share some places you might get more ideas, both for your project, but also for your ongoing work as Laudato Si animators. Your project is very important, but we know that's not the end of your work, that this is an ongoing role of animating Laudato Si. And so to think about your project is important, but then beyond that, to think of what else you might do to engage your communities. So Laudato Si Week is coming up. You might want to take a look at the laudatosiweek.org website and see what events are there that might give you some ideas of what other groups are doing during that week in May when we celebrate the 6th anniversary of the encyclical. There's also the Laudato Si Action Platform, which will become live as of May 24th. And that's going to be the Vatican encouraging all of us in our communities to reach 7 goals of the encyclical Laudato Si. So that's another place you could get some ideas of what are the goals that the Vatican is looking at for how do we fully live Laudato Si. And lots of resources will be populated there over the next few months for how to do that. So encourage all of you in your journey as Laudato Si animators. You might want to encourage your parishes, your dioceses, your schools, any of your communities to actively participate in this journey with the Vatican towards fully living Laudato Si over the next 7 years. And then there's lots of websites where you can get ideas and resources. Sowing Hope for the Planet is the website of UISG, of Congregations of Women Religious, and there's lots of resources and examples of what religious orders around the world are doing to live Laudato Si. Of course, we have the Global Catholic Climate Movement. It has lots of resources about how we can engage with Laudato Si. And then in the US context, there's the Catholic Climate Covenant, which has a lot of resources as well, that I think a lot of it would be relevant for English speakers around the world, not just in the US, but there's a lot of good resources there. And as I said, becoming a Laudato Si animator doesn't end just with your project. And one way you might consider continuing to live out this commitment is to create Laudato Si circles. And these are actually small groups that continue to support one another. The members support one another to journey in living Laudato Si more fully. We know that this is this whole ecological conversion is best done in community, just like our Catholic faith is best lived in community in our parishes and under the Eucharist. And so it's a great idea as animators to gather a group of other people who really want to support each other in their journey of ecological conversion, living simply, and raising that prophetic voice. So I want to thank you and join GCCM in thanking you for taking this journey as a Laudato Si animator and heeding the Pope's call to live Laudato Si and hear the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor, and to live that fully in your own lives and the lives of your community.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Marianne. Of course, it was really, really wonderful hearing the messages that we have for week 4 today, and actually looking at areas like lifestyle, working around lifestyle change, prophetic voice, footprint reduction, challenging, of course, the fossil fuel industry, and also sharing with us some of the upcoming opportunities like the COP26, very, very relevant places to make a policy change. Also the COP on biodiversity, as well as asking spreading the message of divestment, which can come from within us, from the Catholic institutions, parishes, and other related organizations. And just to kick us, we are now getting into this session of questions and answers. And for the animators, if you have any question for our presenter today, write it on the chat, and Cheryl will be sampling some of these questions that are going to be answered live. Well, remember that we cannot answer all of them in the main room. We are going, after this, we are going to be into breakout sessions, and we are going to have the discussion continuing from there. Now, Marian, before Cheryl comes in, there is this question on when you are sharing on some of the capstone projects. What kind of actions, or what can inspire one to identify an area to work in within its parish or within its community? What kind of activities, or what kind of what are these things that makes someone say, oh, I need a change here, I need a change there, just before Cheryl comes in?
Sure. I think that I always say the first thing is to follow your own passion. You're going to do the best job on something that you're really excited about and something you're really interested in. So if there's a particular aspect of caring for our common home that you're particularly passionate about, I would encourage you to follow that. The other guide might be, do you know, is there already some interest in your parish, maybe in your parish, your school, or other group? There's already some interest in doing something related to living Laudato Si, and people never really had a leader to lead them in that. And so that might be a guide for being able to lead people in doing something they've been wanting to do, but just never had the energy to do. The other thing is just to look around in your community and what's needed. You know, is there a need for a cleanup of a beach like we saw in one of the projects? Is there a need to plant some trees in an area that really has been very deforested, or it doesn't have the tree coverage that's so healthful, both for our planet, but for our local communities, to have the shade of trees as we have a warming world? So I'd say those three things: your personal passion, what the interest of the group you're working with, and then what you see the needs in your community.
Thank you so much, Marianne. Cheryl, the floor is now yours for the sampled questions from the chat box.
Thank you, Prince. So we'd like to ask everyone to please take this opportunity to learn more from Marianne and to ask your questions on chat. So this question, one question was actually also asked from Bishop Alwyn from India when he did this presentation, but we would also love to hear from Marianne about any suggestions as how a reluctant parish can be brought on board. I suppose this is in reference to a parish priest. So Marianne?
This is always a very common question, and it's very challenging. I'm very fortunate. I'm in a Franciscan parish. Brother Ben will appreciate this. I'm in a Franciscan parish, and so Laudato Si is very foremost, and so we're able to do a lot, but I know that's not the case in a lot of places. I think that the best way to work with that is to find people in your community that also are very concerned about caring for creation and also passionate about Laudato Si. There's always strength in numbers. So if you had a group that could organize and arrange a meeting with the leader of your parish or the other group you're in to explain why this is important. And I think a really important part is to say you're willing to do the work because the pastor might be willing to say, sure, I'm support this, but he's concerned that he already has way too much to do and he doesn't want to have to be responsible for it. So I would say when you present it to a pastor, another leader of your group, to be very clear that you're willing to do the work and you just want the leader, the pastor, to promote it and to okay it and to really encourage people to get involved. So I think, yeah, getting people allied together and making clear and that you're willing to do the work and you just want the pastor to say yes, to give the approval and to allow you to promote it with everyone else.
Thank you, Marianne. I think this is quite related to that first question. So the question is from Malawi. This movement seems to be new in my parish and even in my country, Malawi. How can I inspire my community to understand and live Laudato Si?
I think that no matter what your setting is, so if it's Malawi, if it's, you know, Los Angeles, if it's Australia, if it's Malaysia, I think it's really important to inspire people by talking first very locally. It's very abstract when you talk about climate change or, you know, biodiversity, but if you can talk very locally, like what's happening in your community in Malawi, is there concern about trash? Is there concern about deforestation? You know, find a very local, is there concern about water being polluted? Find a very local issue that people know intimately in their own personal lives, and then share passages from Laudato Si that relate to that, so they can see that the Pope is talking directly to them in their community and in their experience. And from there, you can very much energize people because it's out of their own personal experience and concerns.
Thank you, Marianne. And someone who's living in Kakuma camp in Kenya asked, how can we bring on board the refugee communities into taking part or playing active role in various projects without necessarily having to step on the toes of some agencies operating within the camp?
Wow. I have to say that is really out of my experience. I don't know if Prince or Brother Ben being in Kenya might have more of an answer, or maybe that's something that one of the GCCM staff gets back to that person. That's so out of my experience. I don't want to step out of, yeah, I'm afraid I don't know how to answer that. Yeah. It's a very challenging situation all around, both being in a camp like that. And then I just want to congratulate you for wanting to do this work in very challenging situation.
Thank you, Marianne. So Olivia here is a leader for youth in the church. What are your greatest wishes for us, the youth, to do with the young children? And what do you believe there is most need for? How could you see this within, oh no, sorry, so we end there. What do you believe there is most need for? And what's your greatest wish for the animators to do with the young children in terms of bringing Laudato Si into the young children?
Sure. Again, I think it would be very much starting with the young children about what they see around them, their local context, and talk about that. If there's a you know, local waterway, a stream, a river, a lake, you know, do you actually bring them to experience, you know, local woods, actually have them experience the beauty of nature that's in local, and then talk about how it's threatened and how they can be part of the solution, whether it's a cleanup. I can tell you that from my own experience, how powerful it is to have young people talk to government officials. to have government officials hear children come in and say that this is so important to them. So my hope is for young people to find their voice and how they can speak to older people about the need to make a change. But it first starts with getting them to understand the beauty of nature around them and why it's important for them to protect it, and then giving them the way to talk to others about the need for change. And they can do that in their families. They can do that with government leaders and others who are in areas of authority.
Thanks, Marianne. And this is about fossil fuel divestment. So the question is if you could talk a little more about fossil fuel divestment and some more specifics about how it would look like in a parish.
Sure. So divestment, and there's a whole, I think that GCCM maybe can, maybe we could have some links in the chat to where people can find information on divestment from the GCCM website. But basically, there's all different ways. Some groups say they're going to totally divest from all fossil fuels. Some start making incremental changes and divesting from, like, say, coal or from tar sands or some of the worst excesses of fossil fuels. So I think there's all different approaches to that. In a parish, I think it depends. Some parishes maybe have some independence of where their funding is, where it's invested, where some would be more at the diocesan level. And so you'd need to talk with the diocese about their investments. So I think it kind of depends on how your financing in your parish is located. And I see people are putting resources in the chat.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing.
That's what we're about. We're a community of learning. I only have a little bit of information, a little bit of perspective. So it's great that other people are sharing their knowledge and perspectives as well.
Yes, this is indeed so appreciated. Would you have other questions? We have room for 2 to 3 questions more. Okay, so the questions about the capstone project will be discussed in the meeting next week. I've seen a couple of questions about the due dates and what the capstone project. So we have a conversation next week with the program managers, and that's what we will be discussing.
I do see a question about, are there 2 or 3 demands directed towards top 26 that all GCM members can push? I do believe that GCCM is working on a petition to global leaders, both for the climate talks and biodiversity. So look for that, and that will have the common demands for Catholics. And that could be certainly, as Laudato Si animators, that you could really get people in your communities to sign that petition. And so that collectively as Catholics around the world, we can influence those very important talks. And that can be a very powerful moment if we have thousands and thousands and thousands of Catholics signing a petition with a common demand for those 2 pivotal moments this year. So please look for that.
Indeed. So that petition will be out soon. I think it will be launched on the 17th, but it could very well be also the capstone project for some of you to gather signatures for that campaign. So that will be mostly on biodiversity, but also on indigenous people. And so yes, please look for it. Look out for it. The launching is on May 17th. We will also have a website for that petition.
Thank you, Cheryl, and thank you, Marianne, for these wonderful discussions. These questions are really, really wonderful and enriching. Meaning, when people ask questions, they understood it and they want clarity now. And I like when after a speaker presents, there are lots of questions, meaning how attentive the participants were. And thank you so much, Cheryl, for sampling some of these questions. And Cheryl is actually one of our tech guys today. So our next session is that we are going into small group discussions. And these group discussions, we have a question that we are going to try and answer. And Cheryl is going to break us out into groups of, Cheryl, if possible, 4, 5. And in these groups, we are going to answer the question, what is your vision for how you will bring Laudato Si to life in your own community? And what is the first step to put that into motion? What is your vision for how you will bring Laudato Si to life in your own community? And what is the first step to put that into motion? And Cheryl, once you are ready, you can just break us. But for our French speaking, if you only speak French, once you are called to join a room, don't join. You just remain in the main room here where all the French speakers are meeting. For English speakers, you have to join the room to meet some other 3 or 4 persons. Thank you. And I'm just sharing the question on the chat there. And so once a small screen pops on your window there, just click join and you will be taken to that room. French speaking, just remain behind.